Have you ever wanted to stay close to the people you love, but still carve out your own space in the world? Well, today we're in the world of Hemford-on-Bagley, and I am building an eco barn conversion for a young Sim who didn't want to leave his family farm, but he wanted to find a whole new way to live within it. So naturally, the first thing I did was pull out every vaguely eco-friendly, slightly ugly item from build mode and throw them onto the lot because I needed to know what I was working with. I had visions of this beautiful, charming little barn conversion, and I knew our Sim would want to make sure that it could live in harmony with some of these really important and technologically advanced pieces. I know, it looks a bit chaotic now, but trust me, there is a reason for everything, I promise, including why I dig this big mysterious hole behind the barn. I had what I thought was a brilliant idea, and I can't wait to share it with you all later. So this young man, I'm imagining he's just returned home from uni, he's full of ideas, he's got these muddy boots, and he's got a dream of living close to the land. He's not quite ready to leave the family farm just yet, but he is ready for his own space. So together with his parents, he's turning an old stone barn on his family farm into an eco-friendly home all of his own. So settle in and let's watch this cozy little barn grow into something so much more than just four walls. Now what I'm doing first is I'm just trying to get a feel for how big the space needs to be to comfortably fit everything in. I knew that I did want us to be able to get a double bed in here because I quite like the thought that maybe eventually he might want to share this with someone else, maybe a partner. So I thought it might be nice to plan for that ahead of time and imagine this as a space that could comfortably potentially fit two people. That being said, it is very cozy and it is very snug, and I think it would be the perfect place to wait out a rainstorm with someone special. One thing I knew I really wanted to get right was the windows and doors. They were going to be make or break. This world, Hemford-on-Bagley, it's based loosely on the English countryside, maybe the Cotswolds or somewhere like that. And a lot of barn conversions in England, they would originally have had a large barn door at the front for getting I don't know really, farm stuff in and out, animals in and out, whatever they need to, equipment, hay, in and out nice and easily. So when these buildings are converted, what they'll typically do is just replace that large opening with a nice big glass door or window and let all the gorgeous natural light in. So that's what I wanted to do here as well. So I put down this really large sliding glass door, but then I also mixed it with some smaller cottagecore windows because I didn't want to lose the rustic charm of the building. I didn't want it to look like someone had built this from scratch, a modern building just plunked down in the English countryside. I wanted to be able to retain a lot of that history. And one thing that really excited me about this build is it gave me an opportunity to use the new window wallpaper feature that we got in the new base game update recently. I'm calling them window wallpapers because they look like windows, but they're technically found in the wallpaper section of build mode. And they allow us to create these huge seamless glass openings in our buildings now. And you'll see eventually I got this one to go all the way up this left-hand side of the building and create this really lovely framing of the Hemford-on-Bagley countryside. If you've been watching my channel recently, you'll know that I do love a lofted bedroom, and I was tempted to do one here. We do have enough space for it. But like I say, I really wanted to give him a little bit more bedroom space, just planning ahead for the future. And so this lofted area, I actually end up converting this into an office space for him. And I thought a little home office space would be really important for this Sim because I think his career and his passion would be to become a civil designer. Now, the civil designer was a work from home career in the Sims 4 Eco Lifestyle expansion pack. And so I thought this little office space would be perfect, the perfect separation of work and home to have it up there. If you're enjoying this cozy build so far, it would mean the absolute world to me if you hit like and subscribe. It really helps me keep making these story-rich homes for you. And if you have any thoughts or ideas, drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Now, I was reading a little bit about typical English barns, and I learned that they would often have quite a steep roof pitch. And that is great because that's what allowed us to snuggle in that little office space there. And you'll see, I do eventually decide to make this a green roof. The story I was thinking we could try and tell here is that perhaps the barn, it was falling apart a bit, it was unloved, and the roof maybe needed total and complete repair in order to make the building safe and watertight. So I do toy with the idea of putting some little skylights in, but I end up getting rid of them in favour for an all-green roof. Another new feature that we got in our recent base game update was the ability to put plants more easily on the roof, which again, perfect timing because I was able to go over this green roof at the end with all kinds of beautiful flowers, and it ends up being really colorful and fun. I imagine when he went off to uni, he didn't want to leave. Not really. I mean, he was excited, and in the end, uni was fine. It was good even. He learned a lot, he met a lot of people, but the city and the noise and the pace, it just made him tense up in a way that he didn't even realize until he came home again. I'd be interested to know if you were renovating your own home, tiny or otherwise, what type of building would you want to convert? Would it be a barn conversion like this? Would it be maybe a school? I know a lot of people in the UK are converting old school buildings that aren't being used anymore, maybe because they're too small and they can no longer deal with the demands of a growing village. So they've had to build a new, larger school, and the smaller school is no longer being used. So one thing that people do is convert those buildings. Or maybe it'd be something completely different. Let me know, what type of building would you like to convert into a home? We had to go with this stone from the cottage living expansion pack. So many of the builds that are already in this world use this stone or a variation of this stone. And it really does make it look like it's set in the Cotswold countryside. It's just so charming. And I just think it transforms the whole build when we get this stone on the walls. It really, really does. And I used it not so sparingly on the outside as well as the inside. I wanted to tell the story that he had used a lot of reclaimed wood when he was renovating this barn with his parents. Not only because I think wood is so lovely and warm and soft and homely, but also because I think that would play in very well to his values. So maybe he was able to get some wood that was either being used for something else on the farm, or maybe he went to a lumber company, something like that. Maybe some of it was already used for the structure of the original barn and he was just able to salvage it. So I used different materials, different colors on the inside walls to kind of give it some personality, to show off his personality a little bit. I used some paneling in some places to lean into that reclaimed wood vibe that we were going for, and some plaster in other places to really give it some variety and some interest. And then I think I must have tried almost every kitchen counter that we have in the game in this kitchen. I could not make up my mind how I wanted this to look. It was a close call between the horse ranch and the cottage living counters, but the cottage living, I don't know. I think whilst he would have liked them because they made him think of home and family, I think they do lean, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, I think they do lean a little bit more grandma than young man fresh back from uni. I think he'd prefer something a little less flamboyant and a little bit more simple, but still very rustic. I think these do still have that rustic charm that he's craving. And I really loved how all these different wood colors ended up looking and playing together in this little kitchen, because it is quite a small space. I was trying to think to myself as I was building this, does he like to cook? Is that a favorite pastime of his? And I think he would probably get a lot of satisfaction from cooking with things that he has grown from the land. I don't think he's necessarily into particularly fancy food or anything like that, but he likes solid, hearty meals that prepare him for a day's work and fill him up when he comes home and just make him feel all warm and cozy inside. I think that's what he likes to cook in this kitchen. I did also go back and forth a little bit on what appliances to give him, because I did think it would be important to him to use appliances with low energy consumption, of course, but also I don't think he'd be necessarily into the most expensive or the most showy items. You can actually upgrade a lot of your appliances to become more eco-friendly and to consume less power. So I think he would do that as well. But I did end up going with these really quite expensive appliances, and it did feel a bit extravagant for such a young Sim. But I think if he was going to splash out anywhere, it would be on something like this. I think this is what would be important to him, rather than, making sure his rooms were picture perfect and Pinterest ready. I think he would choose things that would help him live a lifestyle that's in line with his values. So that's why I went for these really quite extravagant appliances. Let me know what you think about that. I can imagine that his parents collected bits and pieces from their family home not too far away and brought them up here. And that's what I love about these little shelves here that I put above the sink. There's a little oven mitt, a little coffee mug, a little kettle. I think these probably belong to his parents and maybe even further back, other ancestors as well, particularly with the teapot and the mug. and maybe they've been passed down through the generations and found themselves here. I imagine that this would be a very close family, and I think this is something that this young man would absolutely love. So all the little mismatched pieces here, they all tell their own story and they all hold a special memory for him. And then one thing, of course, that is very important in a small kitchen is to maximize that counter space. So I was very pleased when I remembered that we have this wall drying rack for dishes and other pieces as well. So I put this next to the shelves, and I thought these two pieces together were great because they look like something that he might have possibly knocked together himself, or maybe he found them at a thrift store or a flea market or something like that, and he's giving them a new life in this kitchen space. And of course, every good British home needs a kettle, very important, so we can get our hands on a cup of tea whenever we need one. And I think the first thing he does when he comes back from working on the land after a long day would be to come into this kitchen, fill up the kettle and pop it on ready for a cup of tea to warm himself up. So that's why I put it down right there next to the sink. Now, in my research and my learning about traditional barns in the English countryside to prepare myself for this build, I learned that particularly from the later medieval period onward, flagstones might have been used on the flooring because they provided this durable and admittedly somewhat expensive option. This would have probably been one of the finer barns that had this particular floor, but I was really pleased when I saw in The Sims that we do have some flagstone options. So what I thought we could do is tell the story that maybe in some parts of the barn the flagstone was in slightly better condition and they were able to save it and preserve it, and maybe in other areas it was slightly more damaged and needed replacing. So we kept the flagstone. In the end, we keep it in the middle, we keep it in the kitchen and the bathroom, and then we go for some of that reclaimed looking wood in the other areas, maybe to replace the damaged floor. And I thought our young man, he would probably have looked at this and he would have thought, well, the flagstone is in the best condition here in the middle of the barn, so why not use that to guide our floor plan? Why not put the kitchen and the bathroom on the flagstone floor as more of like the work areas, and then have the more relaxing areas on the wooden floor around the outside? And talk about indecisive, I must have looked at every single chair because what I was looking for was something that maybe he could have built himself, but I didn't want it to look too rustic. I think he would have been quite good at woodwork and that kind of thing, but I also didn't want it to look so formal. So this was where I had to really challenge myself to think about his skill level and his preferences and how they would come together in the ideal dining chair. And I probably put way too much thought into it, to be honest, but it's a lot of fun, I think, to hone in on your Sims personality as you're building. So you'll see I settle on these chairs for a little while and then I think, no. And of course, I swapped them out for something else. But this table was the vibes absolutely perfectly. And this was what I was trying to get the chairs to match. I love how this table looks solid and trustworthy, like you could put your full weight on it, but still homemade and still like it could potentially be a one-of-a-kind piece. So that's what I was trying to communicate in the chairs as well. I think this table is from the Island Living expansion pack. You'll see I put this picture down on the left-hand side of the table as we're looking at it. And one of the reasons I liked it so much is I thought maybe we could pretend that this is his family home, his home on the family farm that's maybe been in his family for several generations. And maybe as a housewarming present or something like that, one of his friends commissioned a local artist to paint it. I just thought that was such a lovely story. And I could definitely see him hanging something like that in Pride of Place here on the left. I also think this wood frame goes perfectly with this kind of muted green plaster we've got going on the wall here. Those two colors just look absolutely gorgeous and so rustic and peaceful together. So this combination is what we finally settle on for the table and the chairs. Let me know what you think about it. Do you think it was the right choice? To me, it did absolutely, yes, look like something that he could have built. And that green seat is very similar to that green we have on the wall there. I thought maybe he might have found some way to dye them himself with some natural materials and try to get the color as close as he could to the wall. Let me know, do you like the chairs with this table or would you have gone for something else? When I chose these floorboards, I was bringing to mind an article that I read about a designer who renovated an old barn in the Cotswolds area. And he instructed the builders to remove the plastic protective layer that they had over the floor, to remove that when they were working and to walk on the floorboards to try and make the place feel more lived in, I suppose, to try and match the new planks with the age of the building. So when I was choosing these planks, I was trying to pick something that looked like, yes, he cared about them very much, but he wasn't precious about them. Maybe he doesn't always kick his shoes off immediately when he comes into the house, that kind of thing. To try and make this place feel lived in and settled, not like a show home. Someone actually lives here. This is someone's very practical abode in the countryside. So it works hard as a home for this sim. I thought these curtains might work really well to soften the space and also maybe tie all the different areas together, because what we have here is essentially 2 rooms and one room contains almost everything in one and the other room is the bathroom. So I thought maybe by having the same curtain on all the little windows in this one big living space might just help to bring his design together a little bit and make it feel more cohesive and more harmonious. And as I say, I do think curtains are just lovely for softening up a space. You see, I do also put them in the bathroom, but I do go and change those a little bit later, just for a little bit of variety. One of my favorite and least favorite things to design is tiny living spaces, like living room spaces. I think they're one of the hardest things to get right when they're so small, but also one of the most satisfying things to get right as well. And you can see, again, I tried quite a few different things, trying to get the vibe right, but also trying to get the flow of the space right. I didn't want any area to feel too blocked off. I wanted it to feel like he could move easily from one space to another. Because even though he lives alone here technically, I don't think it would necessarily be a quiet place. I imagine his mum would come up every day and maybe bring in some sandwiches for lunch, or his dad would pop in just to have a chat and a cup of tea and see how things are going. And once or twice a week, maybe he invites his friends over, maybe some high school friends that he lost touch with a little bit at uni, but that he's vowed to reconnect with since moving back. That type of thing. So I think he does like the solitude and the peace and the quiet, but also he does like to share what he has as well. He's very balanced in that way, I think. And also I decided I didn't want to do, like a 3-piece set. I wanted to try and make it seem that maybe someone had donated an old chair, or maybe he brought a chair back from uni that he had in his uni accommodation or something like that. Maybe it was even something that he took from his home to his uni accommodation and he'd just reupholstered it a couple of times to keep it fresh. And then this love seat, this might be an unexpected choice. I hardly ever use this one because it's quite grand and I love that, but it might look quite formal in some spaces. But what I was thinking is maybe we could imagine that this love seat had belonged to maybe a beloved grandmother. Like maybe it's a family heirloom and he has fond memories of sitting on one side of the seat while she's sitting on the other, and then maybe having a laugh or a giggle or eating cookies and telling stories, those lovely things and those lovely memories that you might have with a grandparent. So I think this may be a very special piece for him. Maybe he sanded down the wood and breathed new life into it. Maybe he purchased some new cushions, something like that, and then put it right in the middle of the room, pride of place, so whenever he walks in, he can see it and he gets those wonderful memories of his grandmother. And then I thought to myself, would he have a TV? I mean, it seems strange nowadays to imagine that somebody wouldn't have a TV, but would that be something that he would spend a lot of time doing? And I thought, yes, maybe he would, but he wouldn't necessarily spend hours binge watching a TV show or something like that. Maybe he would have a TV so he could watch a nature documentary or just for a bit of background noise when he's in the kitchen. And so I thought a big flat screen TV probably isn't going to be the vibes, which is good because I'm not entirely sure we would have space for a large flat screen TV in here. Again, I thought maybe we could imagine that this little TV here is something that he's had maybe even since he was a teenager. He had it in his teenage bedroom or something like that. And so it's something that brings joy and memories and a warm, cozy feeling to him, even when it's not on. Another question I had to ask myself was, how much do we put on the walls? Paintings and sculptures and shelves and things like that, because they're so beautiful. This stone is really so gorgeous. And I thought maybe we don't want to cover it up too much, because to me, these walls, they really could be a piece of art all on their own. So I tried to be really intentional about what I was choosing here. You'll see these pictures in frames that I put down on the left of the screen here. They look like maybe some handwritten notes and some old photographs. And I thought maybe he had a few friends over every now and again during the process of renovating this build, helping out, doing little bits and pieces, maybe just hanging out for a bit. So when he moved in, maybe these friends thought it would be really nice to create a little feature wall for him, and they all wrote him a little welcome home note. Maybe his mum contributed some old family pictures, and they created this little memory wall of the time that they spent together renovating this build. heartfelt. I just thought that was such a lovely, heartwarming idea. So that's what I was kind of going for. I think he would be of the mindset that if it was going on the walls, it had to be beautiful enough or important enough or significant enough to him to cover up these beautiful stones. And honestly, the moment I think this little living space transformed was when I started putting down house plants. It brought it all together so well, and it showed his personality and what he cares about. Plants are really important to him to make him feel like he is really living in harmony with nature, even when he is inside. That's one thing I really wanted to try and get right, this idea of indoor-outdoor living, because even though I can't actually decorate this barn with that sliding door open, I think when the weather is good enough, that door would always be open when he's at home, and he would just drift easily inside and outside, as if inside and outside were one space. This is all his living space. You might be thinking, well, surely it's too cold in the UK to do that very often, but I think, yes, that might be true. But I think this young man, he probably doesn't mind the cold too much. He probably doesn't mind the heat too much either. He's probably very used to being out in the elements. I think he probably would have helped his parents out on the family farm from a very young age. These shelves that look like they're holding some liquids and could be used as a bar. Maybe this was something his parents made from something that they had on their farm. They made it by hand, they put some love and care and time into it, and made him a little bar for his dining space as a welcome home present. I honestly thought that would be so perfect for this sim. This would be just the right balance between a young man who maybe likes to have friends over and likes to share this place with others, but also is very attached to his home and the farm. And now onto what is quite possibly my favorite room within this whole barn, the bedroom. I just think in the end, we managed to capture his personality really well. My intention was to just make this space as cozy and as welcoming as possible, because our sim, he works very, very hard. And I imagine at the end of a long day, he really needs somewhere to come, kick off his boots and just relax. And part of me does wonder if he renovated this and put this together in the hope that maybe he might share it with someone one day. Again, I try to choose pieces that I think he might have put together himself. One piece that I thought was very, very appropriate for that was this little hanging rail, this little kind of wardrobe piece, wardrobe without a door and a back. I think this absolutely looks like something he would have made just for those few hanging pieces that he has. You know, his jackets and his coats and his jeans, those type of things. And then I was thinking, what would he do with the rest of his clothes? You know, his pants and socks and anything that he might want to fold, you know, t-shirts, things like that. I tried to choose an appropriate dresser, and I struggled a little bit to find something that felt right until I had this idea. Maybe he doesn't actually have a dresser at all. Maybe instead he found these old crates, boxes somewhere. Again, maybe they're thrifted, maybe they're from a flea market, maybe they're donated to him by a friend or family member. But I think he probably really loves these. I think these tick all the boxes for him in all the right ways. They're sturdy, they're reliable, they're repurposed. And so I think maybe he actually keeps a lot of his clothes in here. It doesn't matter that they're not actually functional, because for gameplay he could still change his clothes in that wardrobe without a door. So it doesn't matter that we can't actually use these. It's more just for the storytelling and for the character that I think these work so well. I loved cluttering up his little bedside table. That book that you can see placed down there is all about fabrication. I found it in the debug menu and I placed that down because I thought that's probably exactly what he would choose as a kind of relaxing bit of bedtime reading. I put down a journal as well on his bedside table. I wondered if he might be a journaler, or maybe not journaling exactly, but maybe he just needs a way to jot down his ideas. I don't know about you, but I think I sometimes have some of my best ideas when I'm in bed. I did try quite a few different rugs in this room. It was quite a hard one to get right because I really liked everything else that we'd found for this space so far, and I really wanted to find a rug that contributed to the storytelling of this room in the same way, but everything just felt either too big, too small, too patterned, too plain. So in the end, I found something that was both plain in the sense that it's not overly patterned, but somehow also still playful because it's just a big circle. And I think I say it's playful because it's maybe maybe less conventional to have a circular rug under your bed. Certainly it does happen, I'm sure, but most of the time you see in magazines and on Pinterest, you see rectangular rugs under the bed. And I like the idea that maybe he did something a little bit different. It's kind of playful in his own way. And then in this lovely earthy brown color, it just matched the tone and textures of the wood so well in this room. I was really happy with it. Going back to what I was saying about choosing very carefully what we have on the walls, I thought this was the type of sim who maybe would want to support local artists. He loves his community and it's very important to him to give back where he can. So I wanted to choose something that looked like maybe it was painted by a local artist or one of a kind piece that also reflected the colors and the landscape around him. I thought that would be absolutely perfect for our sim. So in the end, I chose this kind of series of paintings, which is from the Cats and Dogs pack, because it really spoke to all these ideas. It looked like it could have been produced as a one-of-a-kind piece, maybe even commissioned for this particular space. And then the colors and the textures just remind me of the English countryside so much. I think this young man's home, it kind of mimics nature in that way. Nature isn't symmetrical or spotless. It might be a little bit tangled and a little bit textured and honest, just like his home. I think this bedroom's about making a space for belonging and for usefulness and of course for rest. Everything's there because it works and it matters and because it holds a story. I must say, I was a little bit proud of. I thought, well, he's probably going to have a lot of shoes and boots and things like that. I'm not sure if he would have a pair of cowboy boots like these, but we can pretend that maybe he does. So I thought maybe I'll see if I can merge this shoe rack in with this kind of custom home built wardrobe that we're saying that he built. Maybe I can merge them together and make it look like he's got some boots on the bottom there and then another shelf for shoes underneath. This little bathroom was both a dream and a nightmare, if I'm being honest. I had this really lovely idea that he and his dad maybe tiled this together. They spent a day just kind of laughing and chatting and working on this project, and it was just a really lovely time. But I could not find any tiles in the whole game that I liked for this space. And as you can see, I tried quite a few. But I think that's sometimes the case, isn't it? Sometimes you literally have to go through the entire catalogue before you find something that quote unquote works. And sometimes it might be the least expected thing. Sometimes you might pull it out as an absolute last resort because you've literally tried everything else and you cannot think what else to try. And then you go, actually, that's not too bad. Well, that's kind of what happened to me in this situation. And in the end, the simplest solution was actually the best. I didn't go for tile in the end at all. I went for the same easy light green plaster that we have in the dining room. And in the end, I thought that worked really well because it brings cohesion to the two spaces and makes it look like it was all designed and it was all dreamed up by the same sim. And then the rest of the bathroom, once we got this right, the rest of the bathroom really just followed. Because I was trying to think, what would his bathroom be like? And I think it would be simple, earthly, and deeply intentional, like more of a personal ritual space than a purely functional room. And maybe that seems a little bit unexpected. Maybe we think of this sim as someone who his bathroom would be completely functional. But I think it'd be very important that this is a calming, grounding space that's also quietly beautiful, a space to warm up after he's been working on his family farm and to wash the day off and return to himself. So I did try to make it beautiful and peaceful and include one or two decorative or maybe even luxury elements as well. And then I just tried to make this feel like a space where you could really recharge and rejuvenate after a busy day. And if you want to, your sim could update this toilet to become a composting toilet. They can update the appliances like we were saying to make them more eco-friendly. So I think our sim would definitely do that. Now, I'm probably way too proud of this. Way more proud than I should be. But I was thinking, in a bathroom with this particular layout, where is he going to have his toilet roll? Because usually you have the toilet side a jutting out wall, like you can see I'm doing here, in order to have the toilet roll on it. But here we needed something else to put the toilet roll on. And I found this end table that looks like just a big block of wood. And I thought maybe he was out on a nice country walk one day and he saw this piece of wood and he just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And he thought, I've got to bring that home and I've got to find a way to incorporate it into my new home. So he found a way to get it back. Maybe he, I don't know, maybe he went and got a wheelbarrow Or maybe it was somewhere where he could get a vehicle or something like that to put it in. But somehow we got it back to his barn, put it next to the toilet, and that's where he fastened the toilet roll onto. You probably noticed I did have to try it a few times before I got it at the right height, but in the end I was really pleased with this idea, and it created another little space for us just to put some of those nice decorative bathroom items. But I don't know about you, but when I put my dressing gown, if you're in the UK, and robe if you're in the US, when I put my dressing gown or robe on, I just feel so comfortable and peaceful and snug and cozy. And I think maybe Asim, maybe he feels that way as well. So I gave him a nice robe and a nice bath mat as well, so he doesn't have to step directly onto the stone when he comes out of the shower. So I thought it was really important that this space felt inviting and welcoming, but again, not really what others might think of as Pinterest worthy or show home worthy. And I think that's because this home for him, it's not a performance. It's truly about living his truth with the land, with his values, with the life he's building. And honestly, I would be absolutely fine with this little bathroom. I think it works really well. And then we've just had the space for relaxation, so now we're going to go into the workspace. That being said, I don't think our sim feels like he's necessarily working when he's here. I think this is very much one of his happy places. And what a charming little area this is, don't you think so? I put down some pieces that I thought we could imagine would be ideas or notes or his calendar, things that are very important to him at work. And then on the other wall, I put down some certificates, some diplomas and things like that to kind of tell the story that he'd been to university and come back. I mean, that's a lot of diplomas. But nevertheless, I thought it was a fun little nod to his past and what he was doing before he came to this home. I did give him a little chair because I thought maybe sometimes his mum or his dad come and hang out with him up here whilst he's working and chat about what he's doing, and they tell him about their day, he tells them about his. Maybe they let him know, hey, one of your cousins has just got into uni, or oh, you'll never guess what so-and-so did. And they just help keep him in the family loop when he's so busy and working so hard, because I think that's really important for him, but it's also really important for them as well. I can imagine they love having him back and love having him close. They're those sort of parents, you know, they just like having the family close. And also they're probably very relieved to have another pair of hands helping them out on the family farm. I did go for a different color wood in this space. I think it can sometimes be helpful if you work from home to kind of find ways to tell your brain when you're working that yes, this is a different space to when I'm relaxing or when I'm entertaining. So I went for some darker colors in here to try and do that for our sim, whilst also trying to keep the vibes that we had downstairs. Again, this will make no difference in actual gameplay. Unfortunately, he doesn't work better and party harder depending on the color scheme of the room. But honestly, I think using our imagination and telling stories like that is one of the funnest and most exciting things about building in The Sims, at least for me. And honestly, one of my favorite moments of this whole build was when I put back this glass window wallpaper and you get the idea of what it would be like to actually work here. You know, because you're on the second floor, you're almost up in the trees when you look out of the window. It almost has a little bit of a nod towards treehouse vibes. Maybe he likes to watch the branches as they sway in the wind, or the leaves turn brown and fall off the tree as the seasons change, or maybe there's a little family of birds that nest in the tree that he likes to check in with every day. I do think Sim would be an animal lover. Actually, I did toy with the idea of giving him a cat. I don't know why, but I just think he would be a cat person. Maybe it's a stray that just sat and watched him one day as he was renovating and never really left. They have this kind of unspoken bond. I thought maybe I might like to do this when I'm actually playing in this house and have that part of the story play out. So I didn't include any pet stuff or animal stuff. You absolutely could include it if you wanted to, but I thought that might be something nice that kind of comes with time for our sim. The inside's feeling cozy and settled, but wait till you see what he's done with the outside. This is where things get really intentional and a little bit unexpected too. During my barn research, I tried to decipher if this type of building would have ever had not a basement exactly, but some kind of lower level, because I thought that might be nice to try and increase our square footage a little bit, maybe try and give him a hobby space somewhere for his woodworking table, and let's be honest, for some of those really large eco-living pieces that we have in The Sims 4, I did not know where I was going to put those at first. honest. And I know that hole in the ground that I mentioned at the beginning might not look like much, but just wait because it does turn into something really quite special. But during my research, I found out that unfortunately, barns like this would not typically have a basement or a lower level because the ground itself was very often quite damp and was not appropriate for storage. You know, you might want to store hay or something like that and keep those things dry. So typically the barn would actually be raised up on a foundation to keep those materials, those animals, those resources up and away from the damp earth. However, what you might find on old farmland like this would be something called a root cellar. And what that is a structure, often underground, designed for storing things like vegetables and fruits and other foods at a cool and stable temperature before we had things like refrigerators. They were typically used to extend the shelf life of perishable items by providing a naturally cool and humid environment. So I thought maybe there's an old root cellar on this land where back in the day, farmers and people who were working here might store food before they take it to market or before they need to eat it themselves. And so they might have built and used a little root cellar. I got really excited when I learned this because I thought a root cellar conversion might be the perfect place for all those pieces that we were talking about. And I did look and I did see, has anyone ever converted these into an actual living space before? And yes, you can. I think it would be quite challenging. You'd have to make sure that you have ventilation and obviously things like electricity and possibly plumbing, depending on exactly what you're using it for. But yes, it could be done. So that's what you'll see I'm building here underground. I used rounded walls to try and give it a natural shape because I didn't want it to be too square and perfect. And then I put the rest of the barn up on this little foundation as if the original builders were trying to keep whatever they were storing in there or whatever they had in there up and away from the damp earth. And then I had this idea that if it was going to be naturally damp and humid down here, maybe this would be the perfect spot for our dew collector. In The Sims 4, this is a machine that collects rainwater and converts that into water for your household. And then I thought, why don't we expand on this idea more? We spoke earlier about how these barns have traditionally a very steep roof pitch in order for the rainwater to roll off and not collect. Now, when you're applying a green roof like our barn has, you'll have a waterproof layer so that the roof doesn't leak, and then you'll have a drainage layer. I thought maybe we could imagine that this sim, being a civil designer, has designed something whereby maybe this drainage layer on the roof collects the rainwater all in one location, and then the rainwater would come down this drain pipe on the side of the building and feed into the dew collector that we're going to put down there. Now, I am not a scientist in any way, shape or form, and I do not know how effective this would be. But again, for The Sims 4 and the storytelling and the excitement of it, I thought this was a really good idea. And then what I'm doing now is I'm just trying to blend it in a little bit by using these rocks. Honestly, these rocks are one of my favorite build mode items. I use them in almost everything I build because they are so good at just disguising lines like this and blending things together into the landscape successfully. It did take me a little while to go all the way around the outside in a way that looked natural, because if you're not careful when you're placing them around, they can look like they're floating a little bit. But in the end, I was really, really pleased with how this came out. Again, it just kind of adds to the mystery of, ooh, what's down there? The other thing I liked about having these rocks here is you'll see periodically, I use the terrain tool to lift up the land around the root cellar a little bit. And the reason I did this was firstly to kind of hint that there's something underneath there. But then also I thought maybe we could pretend that this was done intentionally so that the water would naturally drain that way when it rains, drain towards the root cellar, so it could be collected by the dew collector. So the dew collector is going to go on the outside, and then on the inside of his root cellar, he's going to have things like his home recycler and his fabricator and his woodworking table. And this then becomes a little hobby room. And then you'll see a little bit later on that I have another idea for this root cellar that's maybe a little less practical and a little more aesthetic, but I just can't wait to share it with you. I love when buildings are able to blend the old and the new successfully. That's what I'm trying to go for here. Honestly, when I consider that this root cellar wasn't even on my radar when I was planning this build, it actually turned into one of my favorite areas of the whole build. I was a little concerned that in a real life scenario, our roof pitch might be too steep for solar panels. I didn't know how easily they cling onto something like that, and considering that it's a green roof, whether they'd be too heavy and they might slide. But at least according to my research, and again, I'm no expert, but you can have solar panels on quite a steep roof pitch, no problem. And it can actually often be quite beneficial to combine solar panels with green roof. This combination is sometimes called a bio-solar roof, and it offers several benefits by leveraging the strengths of both systems. And in some cases, the weight from the green roof can actually stabilize the solar system, which can potentially reduce the need for roof penetrations. And if we're going to put a lot of plants on the roof, which we do, the plants can also help prevent dust buildup on solar panels. So all in all, it can be a really good combination. So when I read that, I thought, oh, perfect. This is going to work out really, really well. Not that it matters at all for The Sims 4. Your solar panels aren't going to fall off the roof. Surprisingly, the thing that I thought would be the easiest regarding the roof would be to get our wind turbines up there. However, this is where the pitch of the roof actually did become a problem, because I don't know if you can see, but it was actually so steep that it would have stopped the wings from moving. I don't think that's the right word. What am I trying to say? Like the propeller. I only realized this after a little while, and we have to go for a wind turbine that's placed on the ground instead. But nonetheless, I think that still looks really good, even though it wasn't quite the original vision. Whenever I've seen green roofs like this, they usually have the plants placed in such a way that they look very organized and structured. Like sometimes they're by color or by species or that kind of thing, and they create kind of a pattern on the roof. I wasn't able to do that specifically, but I did try to go for like colors. So I went for pinks and purples because I thought they just really helped the building settle into its landscape and blend in to the world around it. I'm very much of the opinion that some of the best buildings out there blend so naturally with their environment that it's almost hard to tell where the building ends and where the environment begins. They just go hand in hand. They're not fighting each other for attention. And that's what I was trying to do here. I was trying to make the building look like it was really part of the surrounding landscape. I love thinking about who else could use this roof, maybe the birds or the bees. I gave him this front deck, and I think to him, this front deck was always part of his dream when he was away at uni. Not because it's particularly flashy or anything like that, but because he's the kind of person who would like to start the day slowly with a cup of tea and the sunrise, a place to sit with the sky before anything else happens. I can just imagine when he was in a busy city, he would just dream of this deck out the front. I can imagine he would come out here and he would wave to his mum as she was coming in from the fields, or maybe just sit with a friend and have a long conversation. This front deck is where those quiet little moments happen for him. And also, like we were saying, I think this would be a place that leads naturally from the indoors and outdoors and creates that nice flow between the two. So to feed into this idea, I used the same wood on the floors that we used inside. So the barrier between the inside and the outside gets blurred, and it kind of becomes one seamless living space. And there's this little detail I added to the front deck that's just for him, something that's inspired by a memory I think he might carry. I'll show you in a minute. But first, we're going to head back into the root cellar. I tried to imagine how he could wiggle his bits and pieces into the natural shape of this root cellar. So we tucked his woodworking table away at the back. He's got plenty of space there to craft to his heart's content. His beloved fabricator takes center stage because of course it would have to. It's absolutely massive. He's got his recycling machine around to the side here. And then the first of two surprises actually. I thought, what about if we made this an unexpected laundry room? Now granted, it's probably not going to be easy for your average sim to get up and down here holding a basket full of laundry. But for our sim, I imagine he has no trouble. Maybe he has some kind of laundry sack that he puts all his dirty clothes in, and then he just swings that over his shoulder. Maybe he's got some way he can fasten it to himself, and then he can just easily get up and down that ladder like some kind of eco-warrior Father Winter. It did seem just like too good an opportunity to miss. But I then thought, really, if it's going to be a laundry room, we ought to finish off the floors properly. Like I was saying, you'd need to think about things like ventilation and electricity. So I think it would be a completely finished space. And then the second of the two surprises, this one just made my heart so happy. I don't know if you've ever seen a TV show called Your Garden Made Perfect, but basically what it is, homeowners have some kind of problematic garden and they just don't know what to do with it. So they go to a team of garden designers who each throw a pitch to redesign the homeowner's garden. And then my favorite part of the show, the homeowners actually wear VR headsets and they're able to virtually see and walk around around their newly designed garden. And in one episode of this, the homeowners had a very problematic garden. When they bought the home, it came with a swimming pool, and they just thought, this is wonderful, how unique. I don't know if you've ever been to the UK, but we do not have many homes that have private swimming pools there. Typically, we just don't really have the climate for it. You do have a few, but just not as many as you might in some other places. But unfortunately for these particular homeowners, the pool had a lot of problems and it was going to be too expensive to run, so they had to drain it. And in the end, it was just a big concrete hole in the ground, and it was so sad. I really felt for them. But what one of the designers realized was that when you go down into this empty swimming pool, you almost get a completely new climate. And so you're able to plant a whole array of different flowers and bushes and trees because this empty pool created the ideal environment for them. So I thought maybe our sim might have done something similar in this space. He's a real homebody, so instead of traveling, he brought the world to him. So in this subterranean hole before you get into the root cellar, I placed down these really lovely island living tropical flowers and trees, and I thought I'm going to make this big hole in the ground into a really lovely place to sit and hang out. Now, when I was landscaping the rest of this build, I was really thinking about our sim and his relationship to nature, because he loves gardening, but perhaps not the way a lot of people do. I don't think everything would be absolutely perfect, because for him, the garden isn't something to be controlled, it's something to collaborate with. So he doesn't necessarily mind if flowers escape and overgrow their planters or something grows in the pathway, because to him, I think that's nature doing what it does best. It thrives without permission, and he really loves that. So yes, for him, nature isn't necessarily something to tame. He sees it as a partner, which I think sometimes means that he lets it lead and go where it wants to go. Now, I did try a few different ideas to get this across. At first, I thought these purple flowers were really lovely, and yes, they are. I think that color looks so gorgeous against the stones in that wall there. But even when I put them at different angles, they just looked a bit uniform. So in the end, I do go back and change them. And I go for this slightly unruly looking hedgerow instead and surround it by these really gorgeous wildflowers to try and sell the idea that to him, nature isn't necessarily something to control. So it doesn't have to be quote unquote perfect. It just has to be nature doing what it does best. And then I had a lot of fun turning this deck into a real social space, because let's be honest, this deck almost doubles the size of his floor plan. So while the inside is somewhere to get cozy and comfortable and hunker down in a storm, the deck is somewhere that he and his friends can let loose a bit more. Again, I tried to keep with the idea that he'd built and put a lot of things together himself. I like the idea that this grill looks like it could have been made from some kind of animal trough. So I put that down in the corner so you can have a barbecue on a warm day. I did think maybe we could have some kind of awning, because you'll see here we're in the afternoon and the entire deck is in pretty much the full sun, so it might get really warm on a hot day. But all the awnings, I didn't think they really went with the beauty of the barn that we'd created. So you'll see eventually, instead of the awning, we choose a table that has a parasol to give him and his friends and his family somewhere to go on those really warm days. I then created this really lovely sitting area off to the side. I thought that would be just such a lovely, welcoming thing to see as you turn the corner around the wall there and approach the house. I tried to put those little chairs down in a way that made them look like they'd just kind of been pulled out and left. Like maybe someone had been sitting there the night before and then they'd kind of scraped their chair back as they got up. And then just like the indoor living spaces, I surrounded it with these really beautiful plants, because I thought he would want to welcome nature onto his deck. He wouldn't want this separation of there's nature outside and then there's the deck. He would want to do his best to combine the two so that they feel seamless and integrated. And then this is where we come to the little memory moment for our sim. I remembered that in eco living we have these tire planters, and I thought maybe he and his parents, maybe they'd taken these tires off an old tractor or some kind of farm vehicle or something that they would have used when our sim was young. Maybe he has memories of sitting on his dad's lap and learning to drive the tractor, that kind of thing. And today, in modern times, they've repurposed these tires into these lovely planters so that every time he sees them, he thinks of his childhood, maybe learning to drive the tractor, riding the tractor, maybe some other vehicle, something like that. And it just brings back these lovely warm memories for him. So I put them down right near the front of the patio so that he couldn't help but see them every time he comes and goes. But just as importantly, I am now beginning to clear out the rest of the yard. Thank goodness, I hear you say. Don't worry, I was never going to leave it like like this, and when we're done, it's going to be a beautiful, relaxing oasis for our sim, and a really practical, eco-friendly spot as well. So what you'll see I'm doing now is just organizing these last few items, those things that I chose right at the very beginning of the build, not necessarily knowing exactly where I was going to place them or what the story would be behind them, but things that I just felt would be important somewhere along the line, either for storytelling or character creation, or really just for the vibes. And one thing I was really excited about was this fire pit. I really wanted it to feel like a place that you could come back to, not just for big parties, but on those nights where you just want to sit and reflect, maybe hang out with someone you trust. And I really loved these logs. They have a really soft ruggedness to them. And yes, you guessed it, our sim did create these himself. I like to think that he made this space himself with what he had. Maybe he dragged those logs over from the other end of the farm, and it was backbreaking and it was hard, but it was so worth it when he turned on the fire pit for the first time and just basked in its warm glow. I had the idea at first that nature was almost holding this fire pit, like it was keeping it and anyone who sat there safe and protected. I do end up rejigging this a little bit, but this little tree semicircle does end up in the final composition. If you had a cozy little fire circle like this, who would you invite to sit with you? This little area at the front ends up being the eco garden. Now, in The Sims 4, bees aren't just good for making honey, although that is a great perk. Bee boxes are also fantastic for gardening. If you can keep your bees happy, they provide a small fertilizer bonus that can help your crops grow. So I tried to place them strategically here so that they'd be close to the planters. Well, bug boxes, they can produce many things, but one thing that they can produce is biofuel, which can be used to power generators without causing pollution. And I think our sim would absolutely love this. You can also actually make ingredients from your bug box if you are so inclined. And this is really fun for gameplay. One other idea that I was really happy with was that he keeps a tent pitched just outside his barn. I think camping out on this land is something he's always done for as long as he can remember. And whenever he does it, it just helps him feel really grounded and reconnected to his roots. And then what I tried to do here was just mimic. You'll see just before you get to the lot, this kind of patchy terrain, which looks like maybe that's where people have walked and it's formed these natural paths. So rather than creating bold paths on this lot, I tried to just dot terrain paint here and there where I thought there might be the most foot traffic, and hope that this seemed really natural and organic and helped us tell the story of this Sim's daily life and what they like to do and where they like to go. I ended up placing the fire pit down by this lake, and I think this lake might be the second most important thing on this lot after the barn to our sim. I think this is a place for quiet reflection, for rejuvenation. Maybe on a warm day he splashes his face with the water or dips his feet in to cool off. I think also this is another spot where he has a lot of happy memories, playing as a young boy, maybe with his cousins or some friends. So I thought it was very fitting to build this little social area around the lake. It's very much his happy place, I think. If you like this build and you think you might like to play here, I'm going to put it on the gallery. I'll call it Tiny Eco Barn, and you can find it by searching for the hashtag SimsBuildsChill. If today's build made you smile, I think you might also enjoy this tiny castle conversion too. It's full of the same quiet magic and cozy charm.